Welcome to No Longer Conformed. I'm Erik Garthe, and we are studying the book of Ephesians, the mystery revealed. In this session, we'll be looking at Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 9, responsibility of obedience and service. The first century had two other sets of relationships in addition to husband-wives, and those are children and their parents' children and masters' slaves. The Apostle Paul first identified two sets of responsibilities of the parent-children entity in our sex. First, Paul identified the responsibilities of the children. Look at that in chapter 6, verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment, with promise that it may be well with you and you may live long in the earth. Obey, honor. Obey is the primary responsibility of children to parents. The root of the word translated obey is the same root for hearing. Listen to the advice of your parents and submit to it. When children move from being minors to becoming adults, the relationship changes from control, and yes, that is the right word, to counsel. Children, however, never outgrow their need for parental advice. In the Lord, parents are God's authority over their children, making the child's responsibility to obey important. Obedience to parents expresses a child's obedience to Christ. Paul then cited the fifth commandment, and that modified the command to obey. It took it beyond obedience to attitude. Children who inwardly respect their parents are more likely to obey them gladly and freely. The fifth commandment contains the promise of well-being and a long life. God calls children to obey and honor their parents. Now to the flip side of the parents and children coin. Second, Paul identified the responsibilities of the parents in verse 4. And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Some clarity is needed at this point. Verse 1 refers to both parents, and in principle, fathers represents the authority as head of the family. Certainly, God does not allow mothers to mistreat their children without any accountability. No, the responsibility in this verse applies ultimately to both parents. The phrase "do not provoke" is negative, as to treat harshly and promote a response like anger, or to push to an attitude of resentment. How could a father or mother do that? Well, how? Impossible demands, negative comparison to peers, overly harsh discipline, public embarrassment. The phrase "bring them up" is positive, to meet basic physical and safety needs, and it moves beyond these to the area of training and teaching. Admonition of the Lord speaks of a positive focus of training in proper behavior rather than a negative focus on punishing wrong conduct. Advice and reproof, positive before any negative. Verses 5 through 9, let's read those. Bondservants, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in sincerity of heart, as to Christ. Not with eye service as men pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with goodwill, doing service as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he will receive the same from the Lord, whether he is a slave or free. And you, masters, do the same things to them. Give up threatening, knowing that your own master also is in heaven, and there is no partiality with him. The principles of relationship for employer-employee reflect those of master-slave. A godly work ethic demonstrated by Christians will be a powerful witness to the transforming grace of God. A pattern has emerged in the apostles' discussion of relationships. He spoke to the one under authority first. Why? Well, preparation for the heart to respond to leadership. Wives before husbands, children before parents, and slaves before masters. And third, Paul identified responsibilities for the workplace in 3 principles. First, let your actions be consistent with your profession. Be obedient. Consider your eternal relationship with fear and trembling in sincerity of heart as to Christ. Verse 5. And be consistent with Christian service, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ. In verse 6 there. Actions which match your profession. Second, let your attitude be representative of the Lord. Be willing, as if your supervisor is Jesus, with goodwill doing service as to the Lord. An attitude which does not need to be forced. And then third, let your anticipation of Christ's return control you. This is about motivation. What is God's principle for reward? Faithfulness, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he will receive the same from the Lord. Eternal rewards are the motivation when there is no earthly gain. That's the employee. What about the employer, the boss? Does God have different standards? No. Do the same things to them, giving up threatening, knowing that your own master also is in heaven. That's verse 9. This is the golden rule applied to the workplace. As a Christian, consider your own role or your roles. Let me ask you, how are you matching up? You have a great day.